also being streamed simultaneously on Facebook Live. So hello to everybody out there in Facebook land. Thank you for joining us. And without further ado, I would like to turn this webinar over to Rebecca and Kaya to talk to us about reclaiming our soul from the industrial growth society. Thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you, Don, for organizing this for us. So, hello, everyone, and let's just take a moment to create community across the airwaves by grounding together. So just noticing where you are in this moment, kind of scanning your body, noting its posture, its density, letting your attention descend into the body and just listening for the hum of life in your body. That quality only you can hear and that we can only touch into when we come into our bodies. And guiding the breath now into the heart center. Inviting a softening in the heart center and an expansion. Sensing your connection with the rest of us. And this, what I've just been taking you through, is how we invite you to align with the essence of this webinar. As you listen, we really hope that you can drop below your mind, which, as we all know, usually processes information first and then, stores it somewhere. And instead, during this special time together, see what it's like to listen from your heart. And to listen with your body so that you notice when maybe there's a tightening in the belly, for example, or an expansion in your chest, or some kind of movement that you don't know the meaning of, but you're just noticing. And let yourself, as we go along into the seminar, let yourself notice if an old wound is touched at some point. Or when your personal otherness is evoked by something you hear. Listen for the yeses that come from your own life experience. Okay, so thank you. And now Rebecca is going to speak to us for a while.
Thank you, Kaya. Welcome, everybody. Kaya, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. So welcome, everyone. I certainly appreciate all of you carving out the time to be here today. And in a nutshell, I could say that, are we watching the slides, Dawn?
I don't see them yet. I think we're just looking at you. At least
okay. So, Dawn, if you can hear me, see if you can go ahead and put up the title slide. Because these particular words are in the title slide, and for some reason I've lost Dawn.
You haven't lost me. I'm just doing.
Okay, very good.
So I will have that up in just a moment for you.
Very good. That will be helpful. So
there we go.
It's up now. Yeah.
Beautiful. So we're here today because, to borrow Bill Plotkin's words, our everyday lives have drifted vast distances from our species' original intimacy with the natural world and from our uniquely individual natures, our souls. And we're going to be probing into this topic a little bit today. But first, let me just send out a ton of gratitude to Transition US, Caroline and Dawn and Nelson and Marissa for continuing to invite another seminar on the inner transition and just to continuing to support the invisible structures. Thank you. And also a big appreciation to Kaya for partnering up and doing this. Your presence and contributions, Kaya, has definitely made this experience much richer for me, and I'm sure it's going to make it for everybody.
Oh, thanks.
So a few general comments about our time together. Our time here is designed to be an interactive exploration. So to the extent that our time allows, we do want to encourage some degree of collective learning. So we're going to be welcoming different points of view and your perspectives, and also let you know that our perspectives, what Kaya and I are going to share, we acknowledge humbly that there are very subjective viewpoints. Mm-hmm. And it's exploratory in the sense that in some ways this theme brings up a lot of unknowns and a lot of uncertainties, maybe even some confusion and some bewilderment. And all of that, which I think is very healthy in regards to this topic, lends itself for open community conversations such as this one. So in that vein, I want to welcome your growth edges. I'm certainly here fully in my growth edge, and whatever questions might arise from that throughout the next hour and a half. But I also want to welcome the wisdom that you bring to the table about this topic, and whatever it is that you hold true in your own heart based on your own life experience. And in terms of limited time frame, we're going to be stopping regularly to ask a couple of you, hopefully two or three, maybe more if time allows, whatever, something about the topic at hand. To honor the time frame that we have here today, Kaya and I have done our best to identify the core points that we want to make in a way that gets to the heart of the matter in the best way that we can. So when you share, we ask you to do the same in the best way that you can. So Kaya, turning it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I am a mix of being honored to be part of this webinar and also very humbled as I do my best to be of use to all of us as we figure out this relationship that's so paramount for us to understand now. Preparing for this has sort of made me both full of pain for our world and full of joy for the self-healing powers that Earth has, and since we are her children, that we have too. This is a vast topic, this one of retrieving our souls from the suffocating grip of the industrial technological growth society, which is structured on profit and power and white supremacy. Rebecca and I, as we've put this together, have just been trusting that what we offer today inspires you to become more conscious about how you experience the relationship between the Iges and the soul. The process of receiving the soul is, of course, different for each of us. For people of color, as much as it's okay for me to speak for them in this moment, the Iges represents, 500 years of countless kinds of brutality and devastation that, as we all are seeing, continue today. For people of European descent, the false benefits from the Iges have been substantially greater. We've been kind of seduced by the goodies we've gotten. The sacrifice is less consciously harmful, less heartbreaking. Yet most of us who engage in inner reflection recognize a vast haunting emptiness that I feel is closely connected to the impact of the industrial growth society in our lives. So with our conversation today, we open portals together to aid ourselves and each other in reclaiming our souls and coming back fully to life. This is an essential reclamation as we go forward together to create harmonious, sustainable society for all beings who inhabit the earth today and all the creatures who come after us. Rebecca and I are going to just say a few words now about what drew us to this topic, and then we'd like to invite, 2 or 3 of you to share what drew you to this seminar. As Rebecca said, we'd love to hear from more people, but just looking at the vessel of this webinar, we can only hear from a few people with each of our inquiries. So for me, I was inspired by a seminar that Rebecca led at the National Transition Conference last summer in St. Paul. I knew I wanted to get to know this woman better and understand what she was perceiving about what needs to come through for us now as we find our way forward. In terms of this topic, for me, and I have a lot of passion for this, as I look out at the national and international scene, I understand the root of the struggle that we're in lies between separation consciousness and unity consciousness. I see the industrial technological growth society as a strong bastion of separation consciousness, and our reclaimed souls, that process of stepping more fully into life in our souls as unity consciousness. So that's what I'll be kind of referencing as I go ahead and talk. So the struggle between separation consciousness and unity consciousness is what I'm really passionate about. So Rebecca, how about you? What drew you to this seminar?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this topic, and on a personal note, what draws me to it is a long-standing sense that I have been experiencing of not knowing where I belong in a society that in my childlike young mind didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And as I grew older, I began to realize that I wasn't alone with that experience. And I started to feel the desire to understand the tension between soul and culture. And then I learned quickly that the industrial growth society really doesn't create the conditions upon which the soul can flourish. Rather, what it does is suppress the soul. And furthermore, I started to recognize that the society actually needs a suppressed soul or a dormant soul for its own survival. So I also grasped how embedded we are in a system that oppresses the soul, so embedded that this has become the quote-unquote normal, the norm. And the implications of this normal are huge. And finally, as somebody who, like everybody here, I'm assuming, wants to make a difference, I now ask myself, how can we amplify the individual and collective voice of the soul so that it can play a much more essential role in transitioning to a culture that is much more life-affirming? So on that note, we'd like to make a little bit of time for 2 or 3 of you to share what drew you to this webinar.
So again, please, if you have a question or would like to make a comment, you can click on raise hand at the bottom of your screen. And I didn't mention this before, but anybody who's calling in by phone can type *9 into your keypad to raise your hand. And if you'd rather not answer on the air, you can also type a question into our Q&A module, and I will relay that to our presenters. So we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, or any comments that you'd like to make about what drew you to this particular webinar, maybe 1 or 2 sentences.
So yeah, don't be shy.
Right, yeah.
We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. I see one question on my screen. Yeah.
Okay.
Comment.
Yeah. Do you want to read that out, Kai?
Oh, okay. It will be a written one then? Let's see. Okay. Karen Locke says, just wanting to be among like minds. Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I'm glad you're here with us. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That was a great way to introduce this. So the rest of you, yeah, don't be shy, as Don says. You know, as you speak up, that helps us really develop across the airwaves a sense of community, which is so important for us these days. Okay, let me see something else. Okay, Jane Dugdale saying she was reading Charles Eisenstein and Philip Shepard, and that's what draws her. Thanks, Jane.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Charles is a tremendous voice for fostering the soul.
Well, here's another one. I'm a little shy to read, but I will do it. Karen Brannon, just want to be present at my dear friend Kaya's first webinar.
Very good. Very good.
Okay. And then there's
All
someone
right.
else. Can you, do you want to read one, Rebecca or Don? A couple more.
I don't know if hold on a second. Oh, okay. Have you read Laurel Beck?
That's the place to start. Yeah.
Okay. So Laurel says, I feel internally the same falling away of coherence that the society is going through. And I recognize the need to build something inside for myself. Also, I am exploring ways to bring this kind of exploration to my transition group. Very good. Thank you, Laurel. And then Michelle de la Rosa. Yes, desire to connect with others who feel the need to reconnect with our natural world and the pain of the rift we feel.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. All right.
And there's Rebecca, there's a few more in the chat. There's one from Marie, and I don't know how to say your whole name, Marie, but comment about feeling that I don't belong to our culture.
Yeah.
Thank you for expressing that.
Thank you, Marie.
Here.
Oh, let me read Bev Ward's comment. I'm drawn by the continuing connections that I have found along this path. I've been working with Pamela Boyd Sims of the Mid-Atlantic Transition Hub and Quaker Earth Care, Rebecca, many others. Yeah, Beverly is from Tampa area. And then Kaya, you want to read Genesis and Laura?
Okay.
Genesis?
Is that on the chat? Yeah.
That's on the, yeah.
Okay, let's see. You know, actually, I'm not seeing, oh, yes, Janice, okay. The land is dying, and I love the land. The soul knows how to connect with and nurture the land. So it's natural to want to amplify the soul.
Beautiful. Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about that later.
Okay.
And then Laura Garzon says, we need to push against all the cognitive dissonance in our society. Yes.
Okay.
We have one person with their hand up. Are you willing to take a question live on the air now?
Yes.
Or a comment? Sorry. Let's see. Oh, that hand just went down. So if you want to speak up again, please feel free to raise your hand, but otherwise we'll keep going on for now.
All right. I'm going to say a little bit about the flow of our time together. So Rebecca and I will each address a topic and then invite you in, just as we did now. And as you can tell, it's lush to hear from many of us. It really adds the kind of the facets to the diamond that we're looking at. So the main themes that we'll look at are anchored in the slides that you'll be seeing. And the topics include, just as a background, sharing the meanings of the Industrial Growth Society and the soul as we are referencing them here today. And then spending most of our time with you on peering deeply into the relationship between soul and Iges, and then reclaiming the soul from the domination of the Iges.
Mm-hmm.
So Rebecca, you want to take the
Dawn. Yeah, Dawn, do you want to go ahead and go to slide 2, please?
Sure.
Okay, so these are some of our core assumptions that we have just for today. And I'm going to read them out loud in case some of you don't have the slides, but they're pretty self-explanatory. We're assuming today that the unsustainable systems of the Iges rely on the repression of the soul, which in turn hinders our transition to a regenerative world. And I would just like to draw a parallel that this is exactly the same as what happens when corporate agriculture relies on the repression of local food production systems, which of course we all know hinder our transition to a regenerative world. Secondly, reclaiming the soul is indeed an essential aspect of this transition. And that to do this, it's helpful to clearly recognize the mindset, the ideology, and the practices of the Iges, to see them more clearly, as it is to comprehend the relationship between this societal form and our inner humanity. And related to that relationship is the most obvious of these assumptions, and that is that a vibrant soul and a life-affirming society flourish interdependently. So that's what is holding us in our webinar today. And as we segue into what the Iges really is, what soul is, we're going to be looking at what Kaya and I think are some of the most significant aspects of these two notions: the Iges and its defining motifs, and the soul and its qualities. And then we'll enjoy hearing from you in terms of how you see each one of those as well. Kaya?
Okay, thank you. I think before we leave this slide, I just like to invite all of us to just review what Rebecca's just read to you and just feel in your body, where do you get a response, a reaction? What really moves you? And again, we're bypassing the mind just because of the way it works with facts and figures. And we're asking the heart and the body to respond to these thoughts here. So I'm just going to give you a half a minute to spend a little bit of time doing that. So what do we mean by the Iges? The Iges, or more fitting today, the Industrial Technological Growth Society, books have been written about it, and we could, spend a lot of time on it. But for our purposes, we want
Kaya,
to... Yes.
Kaya, Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let's go ahead and have John go to slide 3.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Kaya.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So Rebecca and I are really looking at how does the Iges system address the context of the soul. So there may be many things you know about the Iges that we won't cover because we want to really deepen into this relationship. So I want to just say briefly, I know that there are countless ways that our lives have been made easier by the Iges. I'm bowing to you because I'm now going to talk about what's so hurtful about you, Iges. Okay. What it is that makes the Iges so hard in our souls. Industrial growth society refers to one hegemonic or supreme cultural form overpowering and replacing a diversity of cultural systems that each vary according to particular historical and natural contexts. I'm going to read this again and invite it to sink into your heart, into your body. The industrial growth society refers to one hegemonic cultural form, overpowering and replacing a diversity of cultural systems that each vary according to particular historical and natural contexts. This term was coined originally by a Norwegian eco-philosopher and environmental conservationist, Sigmund Kavløy, and he described it as a system of crisis, ecological and human social crisis, a system of crisis. Most of you were able to read an article for our discussion today, and that lists essential components of the Iges ideology. So if you had a chance to read this, you might just recall now which of those components caught your attention strongly. Other words or terms that come to mind for the Iges include profit orientation, embedded white supremacy, materialism, uniformity, standardization, repression of difference, repression of diversity, extreme rationalism, extreme autonomy, all of this setting us up for separation consciousness, where it's all about me and God, it better be about me or else I'm not going to survive in this culture. Fragmentation. There's only one right way. There's no alternative. Anthropocentrism. No beings other than humans matter. They're just here for our use. Deifying commerce. So that feeling good about oneself, really for most of us, especially as we sleepwalk through this, feeling good about oneself becomes defined by what one owns and what one can show off to others. So the Iges has produced the historical forces and structures of social relations that deaden the person and disconnect the person while also wasting the planet. Recently, the true nature of the Industrial Growth Society, which has always been pretty transparent to most people of color, is becoming increasingly visible to many more of us whose ancestors arrived from Europe, the only continent whose people are favored by the Iges. Many of us favored ones have been quite deluded, maybe even hypnotized by the privileges the Iges doles out. Today, however, in the midst of all the crises, it becomes much easier for us to see the mindset behind the Industrial Growth Society as it's applied to making borders between nations, to immigration, to plowing under wilderness, to taking away the minimal safety of healthcare and some assistance for low incomes. The way we see the mindset in valuing the ego of the top dog over long-standing relationships with other nations, and more. So finally, a vocal, informed majority is seeing the Iges for what it is, the deadening and disconnecting of the people while also wasting the planet and all other beings. So one reason I'm so excited about this time with you is we are truly at a transformative moment, and it's in our hands as people, personally, and in communities like Transition. So Rebecca, back to you now.
Yes, thank you, Kaya. So I'm going to look at the next question, and that is, what is soul? So my perspective on soul is an ecological one. So it actually runs counter to the notion that we are separate from nature. And it embraces James Hillsman's idea of the psyche, the size of the earth, which is an essay that's in your last slide as a resource. But in the briefest sense, and as I see it, soul is life. Or we could say that soul is nature. It's life manifesting itself as our unique inner humanity. Or we could say it's nature shaping itself as the experiences that we have within us. And these experiences, which form the soul sphere, are part of the ethosphere, along with the biosphere, the hydrosphere, the atmosphere, and certainly along with the noosphere, which is a term that was coined, as some of you may know, by Pierre de Teilhard de Chardin, which refers to the sphere of human thought. So the soul sphere, of course, refers to the sphere of human soul. So being soul-centric is synonymous with being ethocentric. And what this implies is that that being soul, that soul and nature are actually interpenetrating, that they actually are each other. And this notion also implies that all of that which composes our inner experiences, our imagination, our self-reflective consciousness, our creativity, our thoughts, our intuitions, our bodily sensations, our emotions, all inner world phenomena are suffused with life as soul. And like all life, when it's got the freedom to be itself, it's dynamic, it's vibrant, it's animated. So when we feel most alive we're probably living from our souls and feeling a fair amount of fulfillment and congruency. And it's at these times when we're having or living soul-filled moments, we might be most in touch then with soul as guide. And I want to take a minute here to draw from the poetic wisdom of two of our most renowned contemporary poets, David Whyte and Mary Oliver. When David Whyte says in his poem Self-Portrait, I want you to know, if you are prepared to live with the world, in the world, with its harsh need to change you, what he's doing is calling upon the soul as a guide in the midst of the dominant social forces. Or as Mary Oliver says in her poem, very popular poem, The Journey, we leave, she says, their voices behind to find, she says, a new voice which you slowly recognize as your own. When she says that, she's also calling forth soul as guide. So when we attend to soul as the driver, as Oliver and Whyte invite us to do, we might want to ask ourselves, what might our souls be expressing? So here are a couple of possibilities. Soul might be telling us something about our own natural pace, a natural pace that actually serves as an antidote to the rat race, or to time as bully, which is a notion that Krista Tippett recently shared in one of her interviews, time as bully. It can also serve as an antidote to that state of hyperarousal so commonly experienced today by most of us. Soul might also reveal to us our most authentic role as change makers, the role that we might be most aligned with in regards to our best qualities, our unique callings in our communities. And because this astonishing human imagination that we have is an aspect of soul, it might also point us to the positive visions that we might have about our future, however that might manifest itself in our community work. And broadly speaking, soul might let us know where we belong in the world. What is that niche that feels just right? What feels like a good match? So to end this section, I see soul as our most radical essence. And what I mean by radical essence is the authenticity that rises out of the roots of who we truly are, and not from the conditioned self that tends to succumb to the harsh need to mold us, the world's harsh need to mold us. So now we're going to go to the next question, Kaya.
So this is a good time to see if we've covered what Iges means to you, what soul means to you. Wondering what's happening in your heart and your body, whether there are any ideas you'd like to add on here. So we have about 3 minutes now. We may not be able to take everyone, but we'd love to hear from you. What are the defining motifs, the ideologies coming forward in you, things like that? So please add in something.
What has not been said that you think really does need to be said about the Iges and the soul?
Great. And since we keep having people joining us, I just want to reiterate that you can share a question live on the air by clicking on the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. You can also type into our Q&A module. There's also a button at the bottom of the screen for that. or chat. We're monitoring all of them. And as well, for people out there in Facebook, you can type a comment in there as well, and we can share it from there.
Yeah. So Janet Lynn is saying to everyone, I think we've lost the soul.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Janice.
And intriguingly, she also says she thinks that we've lost the soul's history.
All right. Yes. Mm. And then from Emily D, following my soul's calling, I have found myself barely able to survive in our industrial growth society. I've stepped back from my passions of developing sustainable living systems in order to sustain my family and live healthily.
Mm-hmm. And Michelle says, Iges, indifference, cruelty, soulless, denial.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good words. Let's see here.
Gay Sorensen says the Iges survives partially by dividing us and turning us against each other. So true. That's all that competition to get to the top and step on whoever you need to make it.
Yeah. Very, very powerful statements. Very moving statements. Okay. And you all started to delve into our next topic.
Okay, we've got two more here. Shall we read those first before we go on?
Yes, please.
Okay. Karen Brannon, I have found that the more I feed my soul, the less control the Iges has over my thoughts, emotions, and actions. I have chosen to live most of my life as independently as I could from the demands of the industrial growth society.
Yeah. And then Anonymous, hearing the Iges list felt like naming truth. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and truth telling is certainly important. It's painful, but it's important to look at it, to face it, in order to begin to do what Karen has begun to do, which is to begin to reclaim our souls. Okay. Very good. Thank you for sharing, y'all. Thank you for your honesty. So we're going to move into the next section. And Dawn, you could go to slide 4. So here we're going to begin to look at what some of you have begun to address, and that is, what is the relationship between the soul and the industrial growth society? So it gets really interesting here. And it's, from my standpoint, as some of you have alluded, it's not a pretty picture. We are going to end this webinar in an honestly real positive note. Yet to reclaim the soul, it helps to understand how the soul gets lost. As Andy Fisher, one of my mentors, might say, we need to look at why we are starved in the first place. So how do these two interface? What's the nature of this relationship? And both Kaya and I are going to share about that. So as we all know, the Industrial Growth Society for the last several decades has been shutting down Earth's life support systems. And this includes the soul sphere. This shutting down reveals, in some ways, how the relationship between the Iges and the soul is primarily one of domination and subjugation. David Kidner, who is the author of the book Nature and Psyche, which is also in your resources, calls this a quote unquote, concealed totalitarianism.
Mm.
For this concealed totalitarianism to exist, the liberated wild soul is a huge threat.
Mm.
So it seems to me that the Iges and the soul are on a collision course.
Mm.
That this is actually a very tense relationship.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I also think that it's a violent relationship.
Mm.
That to interfere with soul is to interfere with the ecosphere. And this is a violent act that actually diminishes our natural integration in the world.
Mm. Mm.
A violence that actually splinters the whole.
Yeah.
And that results in us feeling dissociated and separated from our own selves. It's also a neglectful relationship. Industrialism ignores the essential dimensions of our existence unless it can turn it into some kind of profit-producing commodity. And what's neglected are many forms of meaning-building activities that could potentially be psycho-spiritually fulfilling for us as individuals and as communities. And I could also say that the relationship between the Iges and the soul is a manipulative one. The Iges exerts its manipulative influence through indoctrination. And one example of that is telling us what we need to be in order to have value. So how do we see this domination take place? The Industrial Growth Society imposes its ideologies by creating a series of cultural practices. Extreme commerce and its byproducts, like hyperconsumption, is one example of a cultural practice. I see this hyperconsumption as one of the predominant cultural rituals of modern society. There's many others. We'll definitely hear from you and Kaya about that. What are some of the results of this type of relationship? And sorry if you're hearing something. Can you all still hear? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound good. Yeah.
Great. So what are some of the results of this type of relationship in terms of soul? And there's many results, but I'm gonna just focus on one, and that is the colonized self, what is called the colonized self, which we could also call the industrialized self, which refers to the soul's adaptation to industrialism at great cost to its own authenticity and to its own connection to its living essence. So all that said, before I turn it over to Kaya, I want to say that I do recognize that there are many spaces in our society today that nourish the soul. If this wasn't so, we wouldn't have the transition movement, we wouldn't have permaculture, and an endless number of life-affirming human expressions in our society today. In spite of the power of the Iges, the soul is alive, but it's struggling, and it's stirring, yet it's stirring strongly in spite of its struggle. And it's that stirring that many of us are paying attention to now.
Wow. Yeah.
Kaya?
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Yeah. Oh, there's so many different ways to come at this relationship. And I imagine that each of us in this community is sensing a couple of ahas arising in them now. So I'm going to choose to look at the personal devastation that comes from trying to gain and then maintain whatever status in the Iges we can hold on to. So in order to secure any kind of more or less safe status in the Iges, really demands the repression of many states of consciousness. As an overview, we can see that the thinking mind is prized above and beyond all other wisdom centers that we have. In fact, most of us, because we're so busy too, trying to keep up with this system, hardly take the time intentionally to process events, relationships, news, personal experiences through anything other than this mind. Because the Iges is so competitive and pretty much recognizes only power and money as having importance, the main emotion that informs so many of us in most moments is fear. Fear because we believe in the scarcity that underlies the industrial growth society. And so we fear stepping out of the mold and then losing the place that, a person has desperately struggled for, usually by pushing others out of the way. With the Iges valuing the thinking mind, the intellect, the formulaic conceptualization of life, because of this, we generally override any insights, any intuitions, deep heart and body knowings that our own life experience is providing us with. Life lives through each of us, gets to know itself a little bit differently through each of us. And because of the Iges, many of us have given that over. That's not happening. So we override our own life experience, our intuition, things like that, usually without much awareness. The hierarchical status quo is in place and often unquestioned. So then we develop kind of an unconscious agreement not to challenge that for fear of losing our place in the pecking order. So emotional restraint damps down the incredible emotional intelligence that is our birthright. We end up valuing formal education over life experience, and that prevents us from recognizing the creativity, the beauty, the unique wisdom of otherness. We trust data and facts over feelings and intuition. We close the heart to the beauty of others in order to compete well. And that huge fear of not being prepared, not being good enough, sets the thinking mind up to preordain what will happen. It creates its concepts void of any stimuli from real life in the moment. And we just create something ahead of time and then try to do it as best we thought, without any feedback from life as we interact with others. I'm going to close this section with a thought from Paul Shepard, a human biologist, as he describes what is happening inside each of us as we participate in the industrial technological growth society. As he puts it, we experience a feeling of emptiness, where a beautiful and strange otherness should have been encountered. So take that into your body now and get a reading on that. And in just a few seconds, I'll read it to you again. So let your body tell you what it knows about this. As we participate in the Iges, we experience a feeling of emptiness, where a beautiful and strange otherness should have been encountered. Well, time to bring you in again, and we're recognizing that our stories are often more moving for others than facts and all that. So recognizing that each of us experiences a distinct relationship between our soul and the Iges, we'd like to hear from some of you about that. Some of you have already been relating to that, which is wonderful. That's helped flesh out discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe something to address now might be, when is the first time that you realized that the dominant U.S. culture was suffocating your soul? Or what are you noticing about the price you are paying? Using one of Rebecca's terms, what in you has gone dormant? So let's see what you had to say about that. We've got about 3 minutes or so to take some comments.
Well, I haven't seen any yet, but do please raise your hand if you got something you'd like to say on the air. Type into our Q&A or chat. Looks like we got one comment coming up on the chat.
On the chat, yes. Rebecca, would you like to read what Marie-Laure is saying?
Yeah, so Marie is saying that I've experienced migraines for 35 years. So a lot of the stress that comes from this tense relationship is certainly somaticized. It certainly becomes part of the body's tension, and therefore part of the body's way of communicating. Soul communicates through body. When the soul is suppressed, it speaks, and it can speak in the form of migraines. Certainly. Thank you for sharing that, Marie. And then Christina says, I've always tried to hide my extreme love of wildlife.
Yeah.
Yeah. So think about it. Why would we want to hide our love for wildlife? It's not because somehow we're getting the message that something so beautiful and so healthy and so vibrant is not good.
Wow.
Yes, yes. I share that with you, Christina.
And from Emily, do you want to go ahead? Or were you
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Kaya.
From Emily, in order to survive in the industrial growth society, I have to continually repress my intuitive notions around sustainable living, life pace, positive relationship building, health, and happiness. Yeah, continually repress. Yeah, and repress is the word, isn't it? Whoa, push it down.
Yeah, and think about what might happen if you did, if we did repress those intuitive notions. Think in terms of how our communities might gain so much from that. Thank you for sharing that, Emily.
And another thought from Marie-Laure Grimaldi, who was talking to us about the migraines for 35 years. As a homeopath told me many years ago, migraines are an expression of feeling split in half. Wow.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Yeah. Very much appreciate you sharing that. And what an intuitive homeopath you have.
Yes. Do you want to take Michelle's and I'll go over to the question and answer?
Yeah, Michelle shared, I remember my knowing as a child that animals have feelings being challenged by adults and grappling with the understanding that I needed to change my sense of that reality. Yeah. Thank goodness that's changing. Thank you, Michelle, for sharing that.
And Karen Locke contributes, I had been thinking people just didn't know about emotional impacts and solutions. Now it sounds like suppression of emotions has been more purposeful. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you all so much. Again, I think you can hear, like we do, how your contributions are just continuing to round out this conversation. So, Rebecca, are you up next?
No, actually, you're going to go ahead and first, Dawn, if you want to go to slide 5.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. I'm all set.
And then
there was one last comment in the Q&A from Andy Finley.
Let me grab that. Hearing Wait a minute.
It's in the Q&A at the bottom. Andy Finley. They're
It's
watching
Q&A?
the group.
Got it.
And
Got it.
many of them remember feeling out of sync even as children.
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed. I think we're finding here as we share these kinds of things. I'm nodding at all the contributions. So now we're going to, anything else, Rebecca, or shall I go on with the next piece?
Go on, Kaya.
Okay. So now we're going to look at reclaiming our soul. And the whole question, how do we reclaim our soul from the overculture's lost and found? It was sort of a metaphor that came up for me. So we'll initiate this search with more of David Whyte's poem that Rebecca referred to before. So this is one you see on your slide. And I'm just going to read it to you as you read it to yourself. I want to know if you are prepared to live in the world with its harsh need to change. If you can look back with firm eyes, saying, this is where I stand. I want to know if you know how to melt into that fierce heat of living, falling toward the center of your own longing. And just breathing with that. Well, looking at reclaiming the soul, hearing from all of us in this webinar so far, and just with my joy of what I know is in each of us, I know that there are as many ways to reclaim the soul as there are people. And as more of us of all colors, all economic classes, all lifestyles gain greater awareness of the conscious and unconscious choices we're making to survive in the Iges, this is how we discern how to step out of the Iges's maxims, how to move from separation consciousness into unity consciousness. Each of us, because of our life experiences, will find some doorways already open, while other doorways seem jammed shut. Some need only a gentle push to open. So as we move forward, we need to look around, see how others are shifting away from separation consciousness into unity consciousness, and help each other move forward. While many of us have lost connection with communities that our ancestors knew in the past, it seems like these times are really calling us to create community with each other as we move now out of the incredible divisions and repression and kind of suffocating overculture we're part of. One of my sources, it keeps me resilient, is the work that reconnects. And they pointed out some of the shifts in consciousness. And I'm just going to name some of these because I think they're, at least for me, they were really helpful to know. So some of the shifts in consciousness arise from our grief for the world, when we're able to move out of that numbness that the Iges asks of us, and to really see through the delusions of rugged individualism, to see the delusion of the existence of separate selves, and the blindness to the essential vitality of otherness. It takes a lot of courage to face into the grief, and yet, as we do that, we find underneath it, a vast love for the well-being of creatures, other people, other species that we'll never meet. Oh, and that's just so amazing. Other shifts in consciousness arise from the crises around us, which stimulate incredible creativity, bravery, recognition that we are all in this together with all life forms and the planet herself. So someday we may be grateful for some of these crises, at least on that level. Some shifts in consciousness arise as a glad response to breakthroughs in scientific thought, as reductionism and materialism give way to evidence of a living universe that, many among us have never doubted. And another realm of these shifts of consciousness are coming in the resurgence of wisdom traditions, reminding us again that our world is a sacred whole, worthy of adoration and service. So the shift to unity consciousness returns us to our home in multiple states of consciousness that we have access to through our bodies. Emotional intelligence, trusting that each emotion carries a message that enables us to use our life's wisdom to understand events and relationships. That ability to feel an ongoing presence of our body, which is registering responses to what's happening, and so feeding us intuitions and body sensations that may signal safety and connection or contraction and danger, things that the mind might not have picked up on because of its devotion to concepts. The love of diversity that becomes available when the fear generated by the Iges is not our constant companion. A strong and vibrant imagination, exercised and trusted enough to perceive the visionary possibilities we each have for helping to create this emerging future. These are all our birthright, these states of consciousness, along with many more. We are ancient beings who encompass much more than the separate self that the Iges would have us believe. We are ancient beings that come from the Big Bang. We've always been here. We are made of stardust. We know that Earth is alive and that we have an untapped capacity to care for the well-being of others. This is one way to reclaim our souls. And so, dear Rebecca, what is up for you on this one?
Thanks, Kaya. So I think that the first thing that seems important to do, both in my life and perhaps our collective life, is to recognize when we feel particularly this sense of free-floating unease, to recognize or ask ourselves how our souls might be being hijacked at that moment. Is this a sign that somehow I'm not being true to myself, or that somehow I am not living from that place of authenticity? And then to ask ourselves, what aspect of my soul is being hijacked, and what aspect of the society is hijacking it? Mm-hmm. And obviously, like Kaya said, this is going to be very different for different people, but it's a very important question to simply ask it, to be bold enough to look at that. One of the problems that has existed as a function of our separateness has been that when there is a symptom, like a migraine that was shared, or a sense of anxiety, or a sense of depression, what's easy to do is to think in terms of what's wrong with me. Mm-hmm. What what's going on with me? So we tend to pathologize ourselves.
Yeah.
And the Industrial Growth Society would have us do that. Because if we begin to stop decontextualizing ourselves from the greater society, we'll start to recognize more clearly, as many of you already have, that maybe there isn't anything wrong with me. Maybe there's something wrong with the context in which I'm living, and maybe I need to do something about finding my more authentic niche in the world. So we need to really, like I said, sort this out individually, and then certainly ask ourselves, what do we need to do to liberate our souls? What risks does that entail? That's an important question. And Kaya, you talked a little bit about this. Because we live in the Industrial Growth Society in such an embedded way, and because the society does have this gravitational pull, we have to really pay conscious attention to these needs to separate ourselves, and also to the risks that we need to take. So there's a few concrete things that have made a difference in my life and that I want to just throw out, and then we can open this up and listen to what you all either want to do or have done to liberate your souls. And one of them is to literally create spaces and rituals in our communities of souls, for where the soul can live. To create circles where we can gather together without a project at hand, without a goal to accomplish, but rather just simply to be. Also to set a pace that keeps us alive, because if not, we're quite likely to get exhausted. And also to challenge the assumptions, the unexamined assumptions and to recreate new ones. One of the most beautiful ones that I've recreated, that many of you might be familiar with, is that we live in a benevolent universe. We live in a safe universe. The universe is not hostile. Another one, and that this certainly comes from Joanna Macy's work, and I think it's very spot on, and that is to cultivate gratitude. Gratitude is subversive. The commercial aspect of the Industrial Growth Society wants us to feel incomplete and unworthy so that we can continue to purchase. So if we cultivate gratitude on a deep level, it's truly subversive. And also to cultivate just a gentler way of being in the world. And that doesn't mean that we can't be driven, and it doesn't mean that we can't continue to accomplish, but to do it in a gentler way. And the last thing I'd like to say, and it's certainly for me one of the most important ones, it's what I do that connects me to my soul in the strongest and deepest way, and that is to commune in the wilderness. There's something that happens, and this could be an entire webinar, but there's something that happens when we go out into the wilderness for as long as we can possibly do it, and begin to simply let go of the human-made expectations and the human-made structures, and to simply experience nature in a very primal way. Nothing to me, for me, connects me to my soul more than that. And I certainly recommend it. And it's also something that is emerging in the culture in a very, very strong way, as we can see it by initiatives like the 8 Shields. So the next question that we want to ask you is precisely that one. that, and we know that some of you have already begun to answer that question, but if some of you wouldn't mind, we'd love to know a little bit more. What is it that you're doing that does enable you to reclaim your soul? What is it that you're doing that's enabled you to take some risks, that's emboldened you to take some risks? We'd love to hear from you in regards to that question.
Okay, I do want to just point out that we have about 10 minutes left in our scheduled time. And we do have a number of comments on Q&A and on the chat.
Okay, let me go ahead and read, and I'm going to go through these really quickly, but I really would like to give them a voice. I see those 4 a.m. wake-up calls as cries from the soul. My soul says to me, this is my only time I can get your attention. You're awake. Now listen to me. The Iges calls this insomnia and prescribes drugs. Beautiful. Yeah. Well said. Well said. Yeah. I am in a dream circle of other women. We talk about our dreams as messages from the collective soul and what their messages might be.
Oh my.
Thank you. Kaya, you want to take the next one?
You know, I'm over on the chat thing, so maybe should I just read some from that and then you can stay with the question and answer?
Sure.
Okay. So here's a question from Steve McAllister on Facebook. Isn't the fact that over 80% of money made last year went to 1% of the population a clear sign that we need to rethink our endeavors and the energy we are forced to exude in order to enable the elite? Yeah, boy, that's for sure. And then from Alan Black on Facebook. Okay, I'm on board. I've been on board. To repeat a question I hear often, what can I do to help beyond myself? What are others beyond of acknowledgement of the problem? What are others doing? I'm not sure what that is. What are others? Yeah. What are we doing? Maybe what are others doing beyond acknowledging the problem? Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's what, we're hoping that you will continue to respond to. Also from Alan Black, a gentler way requires doing something outside our current economic base, does it not? Yeah. Do you have another one you want to do, Rebecca? I've got two more.
Yeah, I'm gonna read two more, and then we're going to go ahead and close up. The greatest thing I have done for my soul and against the Iges is to do the thing I fear the most, to go into the past and reveal my family's history of racial violence. And in the process, to discover and unite with the people of color, my kinfolks, whom my white family has kept hidden and had turned into other.
Oh my.
This set me free and restored me to my soul. Thank you. This was an anonymous. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh boy.
And the last one is, I am now speaking all over the country about the racial crimes of my ancestors and being accountable to that history and generating healthy conversations between white people and people of color about these issues about true history. Yes.
Oh, those are wonderful comments to end with, I think, because we really, we want to take this so many places, into so many relationships. It's wonderful.
Okay, so just to be mindful of the time, if you want to go to slide 6, Dawn, slide 6 makes, to borrow the words of Joanna Macy, and they speak for themselves, we can enjoy a wider sense of identity than that prescribed by the Industrial Growth Society. It is both our birthright and our necessity for survival. Thank you, Kaya, for saying this earlier. And thank you to Ricardo Levins Morales a friend of Kaya's, an artist in Minneapolis, for this beautiful image that is on this slide. And I wanted to let you all know that you have access to resources on slide 7. If you want to go to slide 7, Dawn, thank you. And to point you definitely can take your own time to look through these, but I do want to point you to the network. There is an inner resilience network emerging in the United States as we speak. And it is a group of people in the United States, many people at this point, interested in advocating for this type of inner work as it relates to the transition movement. And we are having actually our first call this Sunday. So if you are interested in joining the Inner Resilience Network, please send me an email and I will send you more information, or send Don an email and he'll contact me and I'll send you more information. Those will be my closing comments, because I do know that we need to stop in a few minutes, in addition to also saying that I hope we continue this conversation, and that my deepest dream is that we do have, I certainly appreciate the virtual living room, and it creates opportunities that we otherwise would not have. And at the same time, it really does make a difference if we gather in the physical world, and if we did that in our own living rooms or in our own communities, to talk about our souls and to share from our souls, so that we can connect with each other and create that sense of collective unity that truly combats, I suppose, this drive that the industrial growth society has to separate us from each other and from ourselves. So let's do that and stay in touch. And hopefully some of you will join the Inner Resilience Network, where we'll continue this conversation. Kaya, do you have any closing comments?
Oh, just one or two. I want to, thank everyone in the Transition Network who brought this webinar into being, especially you, Don. And thank all of you who joined us. And again, just the richness of all the different voices and the sense of community that brings is just marvelous. So thank you all for helping breathe kind of a multifaceted complexity into this essential conversation about the soul and the industrial growth society, so that we can transform what we're looking at now from a mental concept into a vibrant, felt, deeply known experience with otherness that will bring us all more fully to life. To me, it's just kind of luscious in the midst of all the hard things going on right now, to know that the invitation we're getting to move forward is to become more fully alive. Wow. And as Rebecca said, I just wanted to second the invitation to the inner transition, that exploration and forming and vitalizing all of our outer transition work. And yes, thank you, and to more conversations like this.
Thank you. Thank you, Dawn, for hosting and for all you do.
Yeah, thank you both very much. A lot of really beautiful and inspirational words. And yeah, this inner transition is a vast territory. So only so much that we can explore in one session, but we'll keep exploring this topic of the inner transition. What does it mean? What language can we use? What are some of the tools and skills, methodologies that have been developed for us to cope both with the great challenges that we're facing and also with the great opportunities that we're facing at this particular time in history.
I just want to say, sorry.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Kay.
I want to say one thing about that last slide, so it doesn't look like suddenly we're promoting the Iges. What we listed here is a number of qualities that are that we need to leave, we need to recognize in ourselves and step out of in order to leave the Iges behind. So we're just sending this along too as a resource for you if you want to reflect more on it. Yeah. So just had to have
Thank you, Kaya.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm actually going to take that down right now, but
Okay.
I will be sending an email to everybody who registered for this webinar that will have this presentation included. It will also have a link to a short survey about this webinar and about our webinar series as a whole. So please do respond to that. Just take you a minute and it will let us know how we can continue to make these offerings as valuable for you as possible. So we appreciate your feedback. And in just a moment, I am going to attempt to unmute everybody, and so that you can say your appreciations to Kaya and Rebecca. And if you want to hang out for a little bit on this call, you're welcome to do so and have a little informal conversation. But I'm going to say goodbye at this point to our friends on Facebook. We're going to stop the live stream now and also going to stop our recording now. So thank you all for tuning in, and stay in touch.